Hey guys, Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films back again with Doctor Who Classic. Last time around we had the Sontaran Experiment. What was that one about?
Well, it was a really short, just a two-parter, and it essentially a continuation of Ark in Space. The Doctor and Sarah Jane and Harry
Yep.
transmatted down to the planet because we weren't aware, I don't think, that the Ark was actually circling the Earth.
Yeah.
But they go down to check to make sure that everything is fine, that the people on the Ark could return. Turns out there are some people who survived the solar flares, whatever it was, and they're not primitive by any means. They're not cavemen, but they're certainly not as advanced as the people on the Ark. And this new Sontaran is down there trying to figure out what all the weaknesses are, getting ready for this gigantic Sontaran invasion, and literally the entire fleet is waiting on his report. So, of course, the Doctor messes him up, does a whole lot of stuff to him. Ultimately, I can't remember exactly how he did it, but he ended up crushing the Sontaran, and then telling the fleet, if you ever try to come here, we'll kick your butts up around, well, if you had shoulders, your shoulders.
Yeah.
And then that was the end.
Pretty much, yeah. It was only 2 episodes, and it's one of those where it's like, it works well enough, it's a decent two-parter, but it would have been interesting, actually, to expand on that a bit more.
Yeah, and the one thing was that after that wonderful serial with Lynx, the original Sontaran episode, because he was such a wonderful little villain, this guy was literally like half of what Lynx had been. I mean, he was very plotting, not at all clever like I thought Lynx was. So I was somewhat disappointed that in their second outing, it didn't go. The character was not as well drawn, well defined as the first time. There was a good plot, good story, but again, I would like to have seen more of what we saw the first time.
Yeah, he was just a sort of normal soldier, honestly.
Yeah.
Like he was conducting some experiments, but he's not really a high-ranking special guy like Lynx was.
Yeah.
So yeah. Today we are starting a rewatch of Genesis of the Daleks, which we did many years ago.
Probably at least 2, maybe more.
Was it?
Probably about 2019, maybe 3 years.
No, I could look it up. I could actually just look up when the episode was. If I head over to the playlist, Doctor Who Classic. Let's see. Any second now. 2018.
Wow.
December of 2018 was the last time we watched that. So it's been a little while. It's been a little while since we've watched Genesis of the Daleks. It's 6 episodes long. Originally, we watched it all in one go. However, we are not going to be doing that this time around. We've got the first 3 episodes today, and then we've got the next 3 episodes next week. Now, recently in our rewatches, we've also been doing an episode of Modern Doctor Who. We're not doing that this week, or next week. We're not doing that this time around because at a point, you're just going to kind of run out of modern episodes. Like, there's only so many to really choose from, so I figured it'd just be easier if we just did the classic reaction. So, yeah. I'm sure, like always, it's going to be better in context, and now we've seen we've seen every Dalek serial up to this point, so it'll be interesting to see, just how much of this I also remember.
Yeah, that's the thing is, I do remember Sarah Jane in it, but I really don't remember Harry at all.
Yeah, and I remember going to Skaro, and you see the beginnings, you see the Khaleds and the Thals, and you see Davros, but I don't remember much else.
Yeah.
So yeah, this one will be interesting. You got anything else?
I got nothing. Please notice we might be slightly sunburned. We went on vacation this week, went up to the Black Hills in South Dakota, saw the Mount Rushmore Monument and the Crazy Horse Monument, did some other fun stuff up there, and then quickly came back so we could do this.
Yeah, so that we wouldn't miss any more episodes of Doctor Who. Because I'm sure all of you were panicking last Monday when you didn't have an episode. So,
yeah. Anywho,
but let's not waste anyone else's time any further. Let's just go ahead and jump right into Genesis of the Daleks again.
I remember feeling that this, when we first saw it, reminded me of World War I.
Yeah.
Because of the gas mask and that initial doughboy helmet.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting that they didn't show the TARDIS leaving the Sontardi experiment or
Welcome, Doctor. What's going on?
anything here.
Don't you realize how dangerous it is to intercept a transmat beam?
We foresee a time when they will have destroyed all other life forms and become the dominant creature in the universe.
That's possible. Tell on.
We'd like you to return to Skaro at a point in time before the Daleks evolved.
Do you mean avert their creation?
Or affect their genetic development so that they evolve into less aggressive creatures.
That's feasible.
Alternatively, if you learn enough about their very beginnings, you might discover some inherent weakness.
All right. Just one more time.
So,
You'll do it.
Yes.
it's the Time Lords experiment now.
Coordinates. I'll set the TARDIS for Skaro.
You're here. This is Skaro.
What?
We thought it would save time if we assumed your agreement.
We're in the middle of a minefield. Follow me and tread in my footsteps.
Cooking Wenceslas.
I don't get the Wenceslas reference.
I saw something move.
Well, there's a first for everything.
I have a feeling we're being watched. Harry, I'm standing on a landmine. I felt it shift. If I move my foot, it might detonate it.
Don't move your foot.
I won't.
See, I would always just instinctively move my foot. Landmines would get me.
You back up too, Harry. No point in risking both our lives.
No, Doctor, you'll have a better chance if I hold it firm.
Please, Harry. Don't be difficult.
Don't you argue, Doctor.
He is a military man, isn't he?
Yeah,
Even though he's a doctor.
I'm sure that's part of the training.
Thank you, Harry.
My pleasure.
Let's go.
Yay, Harry did something.
Same mixture of ancient and modern, though.
That's why I think this war's been going on for a very long time. They probably started out with the most modern equipment, but no longer have the resources, have to make do.
War of attrition, eh? Only backwards. At this rate, they're going to finish up with bows and arrows.
There's another one here! Get him inside, quickly!
You see that bright yellow Macintosh there? Say, saw Sarah's yellow Macintosh back there. Didn't they get her?
Didn't seem alive to them.
Grab the ammunition and clean your weapons.
That must have been fun to build.
When I've finished with these two animals, they'll be hanged, not taken out and shot as in the past. And that will be all. Return to your unit.
Hanging by his own scarf.
Turn out your pockets.
Certainly.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Might take some time.
We will avenge the deaths of all Khalids who've fallen in the cause of right and justice, and build a peace which will be a monument to their sacrifice. Our battle cry will be total extermination of the Thals!
That's very impressive. You mean you're going to sweep these wastelands absolutely?
Oh, good job.
Harry, back to the wastelands?
Yes, that's home to you mutos, isn't it? But you won't get that far, I promise you.
Come on, we're wasting time.
Take all your stuff, Doctor.
Maybe he finally found an excuse to get rid of all of that. He's been meaning to declutter his pockets for a while.
How did they not ask Collins to go back for Sarah?
Well, I guess they're trying to go back and get to her, but
Makes you wonder if the dead guys there are actually actors or just, mannequins or something.
Surface.
There's a platform left at the end.
This is yours?
Now you
Yes.
can get his stuff back.
My friend and I are not from your planet.
Aliens?
Humans. Well, I am anyway.
I've heard Davros say there is no intelligent life on other planets. So either he is wrong or you are lying.
We are not lying.
And Davros is never wrong about anything.
Really must be exceptional. Even I am occasionally wrong about some things. Who is this Davros?
Our greatest scientist. They were banished into the wastelands where they live and scavenge like animals.
In other words, genetically wounded.
We must keep the Khaled race pure. Imperfects are rejected. Some of them survive out there.
Oh, Terry.
Good.
Last days of the Third Reich.
No. Well, he got tired of the Dalek metaphor and just decided to go for the throat.
Exterminate. The weaponry is perfect. Now we can begin.
I think that's the first time they've had a laser in 12 years. Oh. You know, I forgot about the Mutos. Or the Mutos. I guess it's Mutos. Muto was the monster in the first Godzilla movie. Spelled the same way, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely forgot about them. So, but they're very interesting. I remember this, but I also don't remember this at the same time. So it's just interesting.
Yeah. The main thing that I would be thinking if I were watching this when it first came up is there's absolutely no mention between the Doctor and Harry of what happened to Sarah.
Yeah.
Right? So if they thought she was dead, there should be some comment. If they thought she was still alive, at least something that Harry's saying, Doctor, what about? And he goes, we'll deal with her later, because they don't want the Khaleds to find her. But there's literally been no mention whatsoever. No.
But I think there was. I mean, the point of getting back to the Wastelands would be to get back to Sarah.
Yeah.
And then at some point while they were running, I think they mention, what about Sarah? I'm sure she's fine.
Okay.
I think. Yeah. It was very quick, but yeah. I think there was at least something about that, but then they got caught again.
All right.
So
I do not remember that.
Yeah.
But for an actual Terry Nation script, and we're assuming that Terry Nation wrote at least the outline of it,
yeah,
it's much better than his last couple of outings.
It's not a jungle, and that's so nice. There's no jungle. It's just I guess a quarry or whatever you would call it. It's like, oh, rocks, no trees. It's good. You could actually. Well, you can't, but you think you could get a Dalek through there. It's still very uneven terrain, so you probably can't get a Dalek through there, but that's okay. It's the thought that counts, and it's not a jungle. I will say there's a part of me that's like, it's kind of nice to see the Thals, like, upgraded. They're not just hippies anymore, But at the same time, they are very militaristic. They have sort of lost the way that we saw. Well, I guess the way we saw them originally is the way they are in the future, since this is the first point of the Daleks. So, and then did we, in, which one was it called? It was Day of the Daleks, wasn't it? That was the first one that Pertwee had, where the Daleks weren't really a part of it.
Yeah.
But that was the Thals, wasn't it? I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah. So, like, we don't really get too much mention of the Thals, honestly. I also just like how if you try to expand on Skaro, you have to stick with that original idea from the first serial where, all right, you've got these guys Thals, you've got, these, Dalek things, and then you have just the weirdest creatures on this planet. Which I'm sure in their minds, when Terry Nation first wrote that, it's like, well, it's just some weird creatures, whatever, But they have to make that, like, no, that is a continuing thing on Skaro, because we keep going back. Right now, it's the Mutos, but there's a story later with the 12th Doctor where he winds up on Skaro. And at first, it just seems like a normal planet. And then, like, a biplane basically swoops in. It's like, oh, is this like World War One? And then it starts shooting lasers. And it's like, well, okay, something's going on here. And then, like, there's this kid, like, just in this sort of wasteland. And just these hands pop out of the ground with eyeballs in the palms. And you're just sitting there like, I think this might be Skaro. I think this place is weird enough to be Skaro. So... it's just such a strange place, you know? And all just because they threw in some random, like, swamp monsters in the original serial. So... it's also interesting just that the Time Lords would send the Doctor to do this. Like, I understand, you know, they foresee a future where the Daleks will be the dominant species in the universe and all that stuff, but for a group that doesn't do anything... they literally say, you know, oh, we don't really interfere in the lives of others. Like, this is pretty big interference, you know?
We don't interfere, but we will this time.
Yeah, so it's...
and all right, so in the past, we have seen various iterations of the Time Lords on Gallifrey.
Yeah.
The second Doctor's trial.
Mm-hmm.
The third Doctor who saw the bowler-hatted gentleman appear in midair.
Right.
So why does this guy look like the image of death from an Ingmar Bergman film, later parodied in Bill and Ted's Bogus Adventure?
I mean, I guess with the guy that appeared to the third Doctor, maybe he was trying to blend in on Earth.
Yeah,
like,
but, you know, floating in the air.
Well, he meant to hit the ground. He just didn't. His TARDIS was getting a little wonky. But he's like, oh, well, this is how the Doctor dresses. I will dress in a manner similar. And then, yeah, now we've got this guy. Because, yeah, in the War Games, when you see them, there's just some robes, you know, not too crazy. But, yeah, now we're getting more into that sort of poofier, you know, headdress style of the Time Lords that we'll see later on, so... yeah, it's weird to think that the Master might be the subtle Time Lord, you know? But he kind of is, you know, he just has a sort of, you know, just a black outfit, and that's pretty much it. I think later he might get a cape, but that's it. So, yeah, it is a very strange thing.
Now, Sarah Jane hasn't seen the Daleks yet, has she?
That's a good question. I don't think so.
Party approaching, check one. You will announce your name, rank, and...
I understand the salute, but why do you have to hop?
It's not hopping, it's clicking of heels.
That's weirder.
I did that.
I get the whole hand, you gotta have a salute, but why do they hop when they do that?
Germans used to click their heels too.
It is an established scientific fact that in the 7 galaxies, only Skaro is capable of supporting intelligent life. It is also an established
in all 7 galaxies
fact that there are more than 7 galaxies. Indeed, yes. Well, when you passed through our security scan, our instruments ran a complete check on your blood and chemical makeup, encephalographic patterns, and so on. Physiological compositions, and so, if you are from another planet...
Oops.
You were saying? There's nothing.
It's not really an if anymore.
Nothing.
Our machine is now equipped with a weapon for self-defense. Now, I am going to turn the machine over to total self-control.
And that
it
weapon has
entirely independent
6 degrees of movement.
Influences. My creature showed a natural desire, an instinct to destroy, and you interceded. You will be punished for this.
Is that the actor who does the normal Dalek voices, you think?
I would assume so.
It could be...
Nice.
No.
Never show it.
Well,
That is our future.
right here in Khaled City.
Davros's early experiments were with animals. Some of the things that he created were horrific. And they're still alive.
And I have an uneasy feeling you're going to tell me they're in that cave.
Oh, forgot about the caves. Good job.
Pretty athletic, Sarah Jane.
No.
You must.
Alrighty. That's part 2.
Well, I gotta say, the new script editors that everyone's been talking about have either done a really good job of taking his story and tightening it up, or he's done a 180-degree turn from the last 2 or 3 scripts that he's done.
Yeah.
Because this moves along. It's very suspenseful. We don't know where it's going at this point. I mean, if we hadn't seen it before, we would literally have no idea what's going on here.
Right.
So, again, it's very entertaining, and you're going, yeah, I want to see what's happening next week.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just... It could potentially be, because it's kind of like Day of the Daleks, where it's like, the Daleks are not the focus. Yeah. Again, the Daleks are sort of in the background because they're still being created. It's more on the Thals and the Khaleds and the Mutos. So, if anything, that just sort of makes it better, And honestly, with everything, back in the day when it's like, oh, Terry Nation wanted to make like a Dalek show, basically, apart from Doctor Who, you could probably make an entire show just on the conflict between the Thals and the Khaleds.
Now, here's the thing, too. We know the Thals as the tall, blonde, peaceful people, and yet here they're nothing at all like that. So anybody who remembers that from 12 seasons ago, you're going, wait a minute, these are not at all who they were originally when we started watching this. So that's the extra thing about how did they go from what we're seeing here to what we saw under William Hartnell. Yeah.
Well, and even, I guess it was Planet of the Daleks when the Thals showed up. They were still, they weren't exactly hippies anymore. They had a bit more technology, but they were still pretty much the same thing. And we just haven't gotten a good look at a Thal yet, but for the most part, they don't really seem like the Thals we're used to. So, but it is also just an interesting thing that I wonder how much they'll be brought back again, because they're never brought back in modern Doctor Who, and I think there's a bit of the Khaleds. I can't remember. There's a lot of Dalek stories in modern Doctor Who. So I can't remember if there were really, if there was any of the Khaleds in modern Doctor Who, but there are absolutely no Thals. Yeah. So they're just sort of like a thing that sort of dropped off from Dalek stories, which is also interesting because when we first see the Thals in the original story, it's the Thals and the Daleks specifically. Like, the Khaleds are a new sort of invention later to show the origins of the Daleks, but I'm curious, does that mean at a point the Thals are completely obliterated because they never show up again, and the Daleks seem to have complete control over Skaro? Yeah. So, that should be a question everybody asks. Anybody who watches classic Doctor Who and you watch modern Doctor Who, it's like, wait a minute, whatever happened to the Thals? And how has no showrunner ever answered that? So maybe there's another... If you want to... For the next 10 Dalek stories that modern Who has to do, there you go. Figure something out with the Thals. So...
I guess those guys are blonde-haired.
Well... Oh no, a clam. Now you fell into the Venus fly clam.
He seems to be broken. It's incredible. Some bruises though, hey?
Why is it always me that puts a foot in it?
You know what's interesting? Are these the only 2 domes on the entire planet?
They think they'll win the war with it. What they don't know is that no matter how powerful their rocket, it cannot penetrate our protective dome. Only a matter of months ago, Davros perfected a new substance, which has the strength of 30-foot thick, reinforced concrete.
Never mind about that. Could you help us to find Sarah?
One of my agents could lead you into the service shaft underneath the Thal City.
Oh, good.
But after that, you're strictly on your own.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Davros, for your cooperation.
It is simply my duty. The inquiry will reveal nothing, except our loyalty and total dedication to the cause of the Khalid people.
Davros is kind of a cross between
cannot allow this
Adolf Hitler and Joseph Mengele.
fail to see the dangers to themselves and the...
Why are you giving us this information? You know that your own people, the Khalids, will be utterly exterminated.
No price is too great to pay for peace. I only ask that when the war is over, I be allowed to help in the reconstruction of our planet.
Punch him in the gut and knock him out. At least he doesn't look as silly as Pertwee did doing that.
He closed his eyes. So, alrighty, that's the first 3 parts. You know, it's interesting seeing Davros playing the Thals like that, and now we've almost switched. It's like, oh well, the Thals, they're kind of the bad guys because they're gonna wipe out the Khalids. We gotta save the Khalids now, you know. So that was interesting.
I wish there was more of a delineation in costuming or look between the Thals and the Khalids, like there is later on, because when Davros was there at the end with the Thals, I was going, wait a minute, they look exact. Because at this point we've only seen them in their radiation suits.
Yeah.
So it's kind of confusing that there's not a more of a distinction.
I think they're slightly wearing green, but it's a very dark green.
Yeah.
It's not quite black like the Khalids wear, but yeah, it is very dark clothing, so they can get a little confusing. But yeah, and honestly, at this point, we haven't had too much of the Thals themselves.
Yeah.
It's mainly been the Khalids, so you do also sort of wonder, like, how all of this started. Like, so when did they split up? Because they're clearly the exact same species. Yeah. You know, they say, like, oh, we will preserve our species and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, well, at some point they split up into these 2 factions. And who knows, there could have been more. It just seems to be like, you know, it seems to be that it's just the Thals and the Khalids on Skaro, but there could have been a lot more that we don't even know about. This kind of reminds me, George R.R. Martin, he did some book that was like for Game of Thrones, where it was like the entire history of like the Targaryen family or something, and it wasn't even a story, it was just a book about all the different rulers and stuff. It was and of course it's George R.R. Martin, so it's a really thick book. It might have even been like part 1 of 2 or something like that. And it's one of those things where it's like, man, to be able to write out that much lore and not have that in a particular, you know, that's not really in the books or anything.
Before I forget, can we forward this to see who's playing Davros and to see if who's the voice of the Daleks?
Yeah.
Roy Skelton. Huh.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, like, I feel like you could do an entire thing just on the war between the Thals and the Khalids. Yeah. You know, start off. I mean, they said it's a 1,000-year war. Like, figure out how that works, and you could write an entire book about that. So,
is Terry Nation still alive?
I don't know,
because he would be very old by now if he was writing back in the 60s.
You know what? I don't think he is, because otherwise he'd probably still be writing episodes at some point.
He'd
you
be
know,
in his late 80s or 90s. So anyway,
yeah. I think at this point it's the Terry Nation estate, and they have control over the Daleks still. So
but yeah, that would be an interesting story, the 1,000-Year War.
Yeah, so I mean, even like you could even just do that as sort of a season of Doctor Who, or maybe even just a spin-off or something. Like recently, the most recent full season of Doctor Who was just just one story, and it was just six episodes all telling one giant story. And honestly, it gets a little convoluted. I mean, and 60 years on, you kind of get a little convoluted with some of your stories. But honestly, if they wanted to do something like that, this could honestly be really good for that. So, I mean, you couldn't have the Doctor be a part of this, because the Doctor technically kind of never, like, this should be his earliest point on Skaro.
Yeah.
Kind of. But that's beside the point. So, but yeah, to go into the notes, which I should have probably grabbed the original notes that I took. That's like 3 notebooks ago. So yeah, I have no idea where that one is. But the first thing I wrote down is just stopping the Daleks, just the Time Lords forcing the Doctor to do this specifically. Yeah. And it is interesting, especially in more modern stuff, they've revealed this sort of like other faction of Time Lords that like they specifically go and they interfere with species and stuff, and they're pretty much like the opposite of the Time Lords. Like, they always go in and interfere. So now I'm like recontextualizing that with everything in everything that came before that, and it's like, so it really is something interesting when the Time Lords do interfere, Yeah. And at the time that this was made, this was just another episode of Doctor Who. It's only in modern Doctor Who that they sort of retroactively throw this into the Time War story as well, which is hilarious considering they never did the Time War like on television. Yeah. Like the closest you get aside from the Doctor talking about it is seeing it in the 50th anniversary. That's the only time they show it. And there are a lot of audios. There's some with the 8th Doctor, some with the War Doctor. There's some with the War Master specifically. And so there's a bunch of Time War stuff, but it's honestly just made as an excuse of, oh, where's the Doctor been? While the show was canceled, oh, he was in this Time War and stuff. But then you recontextualize that with this, and it's like, oh, this is sort of like the first blow of the Time War, because it's the Time Lords taking a stand against the Daleks and trying to destroy them. And you really stop and think, wow, this is the one thing the Time Lords have ever done specifically, of their own accord too, because other times, it's like, well, the Doctor will call the Time Lords and have them help and stuff, but this is the first time that the Time Lords are doing something, they're taking action on their own, and it's to stop the Daleks, and eventually completely abandoning the whole non-interfering thing and getting into that sort of Time War.
It makes me wonder why in the new Who they haven't done something like Deep Space Nine did, where you had the Deep Space Nine characters going back to the original series in that Trouble with Tribbles crossover.
Yeah.
And I know, for example, I've seen little clips of an actor portraying William Hartnell's first Doctor, in an episode with Capaldi.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, why don't they do something where they take one of these old episodes and then bring in whatever the new Doctor is and put them back into that? Because obviously he can meet himself in past iterations, because we've seen the 3 Doctors, we'll soon see the 5 Doctors, and so forth. So it makes sense that they could actually, instead of creating an entirely new episode, send him back and put him into, or her, into one of these previous episodes.
Right. The only thing I could think about that is just the quality of episodes has changed so dramatically.
Yeah.
Like, there is a quality difference between Deep Space Nine and the original series, but at the same time, it's just close enough. It's still 4x3 and everything. You can still sort of get away with that. And then with the I guess the special editions of the original series where everything's cleaned up, you got some new effects, everything's in HD. It does sort of blend together a little bit more, but if you throw like Jodie Whittaker with the production quality that she has and you try to throw her back into a 70s episode like this, that would be really tricky, but it would also be interesting.
It would be fascinating.
Yeah. So they could try to do something like that. Because even you just need even if the doctors, if the two doctors never interact, they're just sort of around in the same point. And, all you need, if you just need an extra shot of the old doctor walking away, you just need someone from behind who could look enough like them. Yeah. So, yeah, it could work. Yeah, I don't know. That would be kind of interesting. So, I think, the closest is there is actually one episode of Doctor Who where a future companion just very briefly meets the first Doctor, and this was before they recast him or anything. So they just took a clip of Hartnell and they just sort of cut him out and put him in this one spot just for the briefest second, and then you just sort of hear him off screen and then the scene ends. So that's sort of the closest they've ever done. Let's see. The next thing I wrote down was the mixed uniforms and the mixed tech that they have. That basically the war has dragged on so long. They're just anything you got in the closet, just go for it. They started off with really high energy weapons, and now they've got muskets and gas masks and stuff like that. And that's really interesting.
Doesn't Harry also say at some point they're going to be back to bows and arrows?
Yeah, pretty much just whatever sort of weapons they have. Yeah. And that's really interesting because I mentioned the episode where we're on Skaro and it's this biplane, but then it starts shooting lasers, and I guess it is sort of that same thing. It's well, we've got the lasers, but we don't have any way to fly. We've got that old thing in the the Khaled Smithsonian. We'll just duct tape the two together, and that should work. So that is really interesting.
Oh, advance one more screen because let's see if it says written by Terry Nation. I was going to wonder if they did the script editors or anything. It gave them credit for anything.
No, probably not. But I think I remember someone saying that while this is written by Terry Nation, it's largely edited by the script writers, I think. And considering the last couple Terry Nation written stories, I can kind of see that because this is so much different and so much better than his previous episodes. Not that they were particularly bad, they just seemed really out of date with where we were with classic Doctor Who. So yeah, let's see. And it's also interesting, I didn't realize that the Mutos are also, they're specifically Khaleds. The Thals haven't done any sort of experiments like this, so the Mutos are just sort of infected Khaleds, which is interesting. So yeah, I feel like you can do more. You also have the question of, how old is Davros? I think he says at one point, it's for the past 50 years or something like that, and it's but are you only 50 or in your 70s or something? You look a lot older than that.
And there's been no explanation as to why he looks the way he does, which is so completely different from everybody else.
Yeah.
Obviously some kind of experiment gone wrong, but why does he appear to have a third eye? Is he blind in where his regular eyes would be and he sees from this third eye? Or there's been no explanation of that.
Right.
We're just looking at this going, okay, he's not like any other Khaled or any Thal or anybody else that we've seen. We do see, obviously, the origin of the bottom of the Dalek with his special chair there.
Right. The chair where every time he turns around, it's always flipping you off, specifically. But yeah, and especially for, the Khaleds who are, trying to keep the purity of their race, and then you've got this, the Crypt Keeper coming in. It's I guess if he's... Which, that's sort of the interesting thing of having, we're just gonna go straight in. Like, forget the allegory. It's just Nazis. It's not a Nazi allegory. They just are Nazis.
Well, again, that's very similar. And again, if we had money, we'd be throwing it in the jar now.
Yeah.
The idea of the master race, this tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, muscular, Germanic, Nordic type was the master race. But Hitler himself was very small, and he had dark hair, and he was not at all like what the master race was expected to be. So you've got Davros, this literally, somehow horribly disfigured character who's trying to create the perfect creature in the Daleks. So, I mean, again, that's playing right into Terry Nation's favorite subject of...
Right.
Let's rehash World War II in science fiction terms.
Right, yeah. And it's just... I don't know. It's just sort of a weird thing to think, like, because they're all about, preserving the purity of their race and stuff, but their main guy, I guess he's trying to, preserve the purity of his new stuff that he's making. Yeah. He's going to make them into a better race, and then the Daleks, as we see, do try to keep that. So, and it's also very interesting because, I feel like this has to be even just the slightest inspiration for the Empire in Star Wars, And this is 74, I think, at this point. So, at this point, you could think, maybe this is something George Lucas would have seen. Or, they just happen to be reading, they're reading the same textbooks that... he's reading the same textbooks Terry Nation did and got the same ideas, pretty much, just in America. But yeah, like, that's... I don't know. It's just really interesting to sort of see that. But let's see here. But yeah, we've got Davros and the Mark III. I want to know what the Mark I and Mark II were. Like, what did they look like? Because he's got the Dalek design down now. So, yeah, I'm curious what the first two were. But it's also interesting that the Mark III was just supposed to be a mobility unit, and now he's going to, like, well, now I've made my creatures and I will put them in there. But it's just, at the beginning when we see it, sort of going about, it does just seem to be a shell and nothing more, which is interesting. They did also make the comment that Davros says there is no life on other planets, specifically. And they haven't brought that up again. I'm assuming that's some sort of thing of like, well, there are no other life forms out here. It's just us. And so if you're maybe seeking a higher power, it stops at Davros, basically. Maybe that could be some sort of way of, controlling them. Like, no, we are, the master race, the pure race, and we will be the only race in the universe, basically. Yeah. But you do kind of look at it and it's like, why did Davros specifically say that? In all 7 galaxies, first off, there's only 7 apparently, and then that there is no life on any other planet.
Well, again, that's kind of a reference to what we knew in the 70s, where we assumed that there would be life on other planets, but we had never had any kind of proof. Whereas, here we are, 50 years later, we are now coming to the conclusion that there probably is life because there are what they call the Goldilocks planets, where it's not too hot, not too cold. There is water, there is, oxygen, or, things that will help organisms live. But the fact that they think that there's only 7 galaxies, when we already know that later on that there's at least 10 galaxies. Now, of course, we know there are billions of galaxies. Because the universe, as the Doctor said, it's only about half the size of what we knew it was later on. I don't remember exactly what he said there. But yeah, this is, you're literally trying to create a master race out of a limited series of facts, which literally dooms your master race to be a failure because it does not understand that there is more out there than just what we have here on this tiny little speck of dirt floating around the galaxy.
Yeah, which kind of makes... It makes the Daleks all the more strange because they will understand that. They will get out there. They will be, some of the most, the most dangerous species in the universe, but they are still very limited. They are still going on this whole, master race thing, but their master race, specifically the Daleks. And it's just, I don't know. It's like a strange foundation for something very deadly. I guess that describes a lot of things now that I say that out loud, but still. Let's see. But then we did have the people like Ronson who would go against these mutations and stuff, which is interesting. Because, yeah, I mean, when you look in the room and it's just a bunch of growling, they see the squid. We don't even see it yet, but you just see a bunch of growling squids, and it's like, yes, this will be the Khaled race. And it's like, okay, all right, I don't know what you're trying to achieve here. Like, this seems odd. What's wrong with legs? I don't know why you got to be a squid. So yeah, you understand his concern, but I also like that they're definitely fleshing out the Khaled people, which I guess that could be the reason why the Thals are sort of taking a back seat on this.
Sort of taking a back seat?
Yeah, so
that is kind of difficult to say.
Yeah, they're taking a back seat on this because I guess we've had 2 serials before about the Thals, and we've never had the Khaleds before, so it makes sense to expand more on them. Although it was also funny when they go to the council and they explain everything, and you got the one guy, General Raven, and he's like, "Oh yes, Doctor, it's a good thing that you told us about all this so we can go stop this, and then we can preserve our master race like we said." And it's like, okay, let's not focus on that last part. Let's focus on this other part first, So it's like we've convinced him he's slightly our ally, but at the same time he's still got his sort of like Nazi hang-ups and stuff, and it's like, oh well, one thing at a time, I guess. So they kind of do that. They kind of do that on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, where in the second season, basically, it takes place during World War II. But the villains are basically, this is going to be hard to explain, but they're the gods of vampires. They're the most ultimate, like, they created the vampires, basically. They are that powerful. And so we have to team up with the Nazis in order to beat them. And it's this sort of thing, it's like, oh, well, like they show up and like save the main character when he's about to be killed, and you're just sort of sitting here like, well, I guess it's a good thing the Nazis are here, but boy, that's a weird thing to say.
Well, that also, and again, I hate to keep referencing World War II, but that's very similar to what happened before the war, when the communists under Stalin signed the Non-Aggression Pact, where they basically said, hey, if you want to invade Poland, go ahead and take the western half, because, we wouldn't mind taking the eastern half. Who in Russia did not see that coming? Who could not see that Hitler would never agree to a non-aggression pact unless he thought it was to his advantage? And that at some point, when he felt strong enough, he would then invade Russia, which he in fact did.
Yeah.
It's just that the hubris of some of these people who say, don't worry, we will make this alliance with the Nazis because it will be good for us. You're going to lose millions of people when they finally turn against you. Yeah, it's just anyway,
it's like, unless you're fighting the gods of all vampires, there's no reason to make allies with the Nazis. So, anyway, that's my weekly JoJo reference for the one person who understands those.
That's authoritarianism. They know that they're right, and nothing can convince them that they're wrong.
Which, I mean, is pretty much like Davros in this one.
Yeah, he's never been wrong.
Yeah, so... and then, yeah, the last thing I wrote down is giving the Thals the formula to break down the Khaled Dome. And it is sort of... It's interesting, obviously, the Thals want to... They want to do this because they're hungry for victory, as he says. But I would sort of sit back and be like, okay, let's think this through. Okay, yeah, he's over here wanting for peace, but I don't know. This Davros guy, he's a little sus. Like, let's take our time, figure out this formula, and then we'll try it. Let's prove that this works, and let's not just go.
As we have said many times before in the last couple of years, that's not dramatic. Real military and civilian leaders of that time would have said, wait a minute, our greatest enemy has suddenly come over to our side because he wants peace. Yeah, let's figure this out first. take some time. But, we got 6 episodes to get this done, so that's a dramatic point that we're just going to have to, paste over and go, well, in order to move the plot along, we're just going to say, okay, we'll take this and we'll blow up the dome.
Yeah. The Thals are not as bright as the Brigadier. I don't think the Brigadier would go with this so easily. So, but yeah, that's pretty much all I got. You got anything else?
I got nothing.
All right, then next week we will finish up Genesis of the Daleks with the other 3 parts. In the meantime, you can go rewatch our original reaction from back when there wasn't as many things on the wall.
Oh,
and
Lord.
the video quality was worse. So, yeah, that was December of 2018. That was in our original run of 4 episodes where we did, what was it? The original Dalek serial, Tomb of the Cybermen, Terror of the Autons, and this. So, and this was one less episode than the original Dalek serial as well. So, yeah. So you can go rewatch that, or not. If you don't, or you can just chill out, or rewatch this. You can rewatch this episode in preparation for the next one. So yeah.
Anyway,
with all that being said, we're Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films, and we will see you guys next time. Take care. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. There's a bunch of links on screen if you want to go click around to any of those. There's a playlist for all of our Doctor Who classic reactions, as well as another playlist for all of my Doctor Who modern reactions if you want to go check those out. There's also a subscribe button and a Patreon button on screen, as well as other links in the description if you want to go check out any of those. See you guys later.